Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, over 100 British MPs have just signed a letter demanding the Foreign Secretary takes action against India over the case of Jagtar Singh Johal. But shortly after, two Sikh MPs suddenly withdrew their signatures. Have Indian agents just broken the new National Security Act by openly interfering in British politics? Also in the UK, British Sikh children have long suffered under Muslim grooming gangs. A conference over the weekend involved several Sanghats to discuss the ever-growing problem. The Kashmir situation ramps up tensions once more as Pakistan requests a closed-door meeting with the UN Security Council, clearly, like many, unhappy with India's behaviour over the matter. And talking of India, we discuss the ruling elite's grip over these separatist movements across the nation. Are the various independence movements starting to gain the upper hand? Well, all this and more on today's show, but joining me, as always, for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing audience out there. Thanks for joining us yet again. Don't forget that we love your comments and we love sharing them at the end of the show, so stick around. Make sure that you see the comments that other viewers have put up there, and make sure to add some yourself. We love hearing from you. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed we do. James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll be taking a look at those great comments at the end of the show, which have been pouring beneath the video, so thank you for those. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, we are taking a look at Narendra Modi's play in the international world and geopolitics, but is it really benefiting him and his agenda, or is it going to explode in his face and actually cause the further deterioration of relations and break up the country? I think that we know which part a lot of our viewers would go with, and they, of course, are looking forward to hosting Angus and I in Khalistan for a beautiful lunch as we launch the country of Khalistan. But let's take a look at how New Delhi is actually working against themselves. Now, of course, we know that with the booming economy and they're wanting a seat at not only the G20 table, but all international organizations. And that is something that Modi is aspiring to. He decided to really push the narrative that they are the world's largest democracy and that their people are a democratic people, which we know is only on the surface. When we dig deeper, we know that there are a lot of human rights abuses that go on behind the scenes, as well as a lot of other nefarious activities and corruption that are happening within the BJP government. Now, Modi has positioned India as a geographical heavyweight, and yet beneath all of that veneer of triumph is darker reality. The nation is still grappling with accusations of human rights, as I touched on, and that is simmering the separatist tensions in the regions, not only for Punjab and Khalistan, but also for Jammu, Kashmir, and beyond. Now, Modi's deft use of influence to silence international dissent is a masterclass in power politics, but it's a high-stakes gamble that, as I said, could definitely unravel India's fragile unity. Now, let's take a look at the silencing of dissent in terms of Modi's playbook. Now, Modi's India is no stranger to criticism. Reports from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch paint a grim picture, something that we've covered on this show many of times. Now, the mass detentions in Kashmir, the communal violence in Manipur, and crackdowns on Sikh activists in Punjab. Again, these are a lot of the issues that come out with the human rights organizations around the world. Now, the 2019 revocation of Jammu and Kashmir's autonomy under Article 370, followed by internet blackouts, thousands of arrests, and other activities to that nature, drew global condemnation. Yet Modi has managed to keep much of the world at bay, wielding India's geopolitical clout like a shield. Now, Modi's genius lies in his ability to make India indispensable, says Dr. Aisha Siddiqui, who is a South Asia expert at Georgetown University. She went on to say that he courted the West as a bulwark against China, secured energy deals with the Gulf, and even maintained ties with Russia. Again, something that we've touched on many a times. But when you're this valuable, human rights critiques tend to get sidelined, and that's exactly what we've seen. But again, will that be the undoing of Modi in the bigger picture? Now, during Modi's 2023 state visit to the United States, President Joe Biden rolled out the red carpet, focusing on defense deals in the Quad Alliance while sidestepping from lawmakers to address the Kashmir plight. The European Union, too, has prioritized trade over principles, with India's $1 trillion market proving irresistible. At the UN, Modi's government has deflected scrutiny by framing human rights concerns as sovereignty violations, often aligning with authoritarian powers like Russia and China to block resolutions against nations like Iran. So again, it's how he plays the political field. And domestically, when Modi's BJP has tightened the screws, journalists in Kashmir face imprisonment under draconian laws like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or the UAPA. NGOs documenting abuses are starved of foreign funding through the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Kashmiri activists are routinely barred from international travel, and their voices are muffled before they can reach global forums. In Punjab, Sikh activists are monitored, their diaspora networks in Canada and the UK labelled as terrorist sympathisers, and we could go as far as to say that spreads into the United States as well. Now, Modi's narrative is clear. India is a rising power, and its critics are either anti-national or pawns of foreign agendas. Sounds familiar with a lot of other dictators and world leaders that don't want to take any direction. When opposition leaders raise concerns about the Citizenship Amendment Act, Modi accused them of parroting Pakistan's rhetoric. After the April 25th Velgam attack in Kashmir, which killed 26 people, he vowed to hunt terrorists to the ends of the earth, deftly shifting focus to Pakistan's alleged complicity. Now let's take a bit of a closer look at certain regions here. Now, when we look at Kashmir, nowhere is Modi's iron fist more evident than in Jammu and Kashmir. The 2019 decision to strip the region of its autonomy was billed as a bold step towards national integration. Instead, it unleashed a wave of resentment, mass detentions, troop deployments, and communication blackouts, which became the new normal. The 2024 regional elections, meant to restore democratic normalcy, left the elected government with little power, a hollow gesture that really enraged the locals. Now, when we look at the Kashmiris, they feel like prisoners in their own land, says Mirza Beg, a Serang-based activist who spoke under a pseudonym for fear of reprisal. Again, they target anybody who speaks out against the government there. And the government talks of development, but we only see checkpoints and surveillance. They're issuing residency cards to outsiders, changing the demographics, and it's cultural erasure. So essentially just trying to wipe out that culture from the history books and from, of course, the future of a united but different culture in India from the different regions. Now, the recent attack, claimed by a Pakistan-based militant group, exposed the fragility of Modi's narrative. Far from integrated, Kashmir remains a hotbed of military alienation. Modi's response was, of course, suspending the Indus Waters Treaty and sealing borders with Pakistan, escalating tensions with a nuclear-armed neighbor. This is a dangerous game, which we'll talk about more in my second story tonight, but we'll talk about the difference... what's going on between India and Pakistan at that time. But Pakistan's military thrives on confrontation, and Kashmir's separatists feed off the chaos. Now, internationally, Modi's Kashmir policy risks losing its shield. The European Parliament's 2025 resolution condemning India's human rights record and the UN's deferral of accreditation for India's National Human Rights Commission signaling growing unease. If China or Pakistan amplifies Kashmir's plight at the UN, Modi could face a diplomatic quagmire. It is emboldening separatists who see the global attention as their lifeline. Now let's take a look at how this comes to an inference with Punjab and the echoes of Khalistan, and that is in Punjab, the specter of separatism looms quieter but no less potent. And let's also look at the international implications of the separatist movement for Khalistan. Now, this bloodied the state in the 1980s, but has been more dormant, and Modi's government sees threat in every shadow. And let's not forget that the recent, over the last several decades, for the separatist movement for Khalistan has been democratic and peaceful. Sikh activists are detained under the UAPA, and the diaspora in Canada and the UK is accused of funneling funds to separatist causes. In 2023, Canada's allegations of India interference, which we've covered to no end here, and that had to do with their foreign interference and their transnational repression, and that, of course, sparked a diplomatic firestorm, straining ties with the key ally. Now, Modi's paranoia about Khalistan is self-fulfilling, and that statement comes from Harpreet Kaur, a Punjab-based political analyst. By cracking down on peaceful activists and alienating the diaspora, he's giving oxygen to the very narrative he fears. Economic grievances like the farmer protests of 2021 add fuel to the fire. If Punjab's youth, frustrated by unemployment and cultural marginalization, align with separatist rhetoric, the state could see a big resurgence of unrest. Now, there are other areas, such as in northeast Ladakh, and there are a lot of ways in which this also plays a big role, because beyond Kashmir and Punjab, Modi's policies are stoking unrest in India's periphery. In Manipur, ethnic tensions and violence in 2023 has killed over 200 and displaced thousands of people. The armed forces, with the Special Powers Act, granting security forces near impunity, has fueled resentment, with separatist groups exploiting the chaos. In Ladakh, protests for autonomy and environmental protections have met with repression, and activists like Sonam Wangchuk facing detention. Modi's vision is to hyper-centralize, which we've already talked about as well in great coverage here on the channel, but he sees regional demands as threats to national unity. But his refusal to engage in pushing these regions forward with rebellion. China, ever watchful, could exploit these fractures as it has with Pakistan's stance on Kashmir. Now, with the geopolitical tightrope that he's walking, of course, Modi's foreign policy is a high-wire act. His aggressive regional posture, pressuring Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, has alienated neighbors, driving them towards China. This is still an ongoing issue as he continues to push the different groups towards other nations. And that is, again, where it could benefit for these groups that are seeing separatism as the only option forward for their sound and peaceful future. Now, we're going to skip through a bit further here, and we're going to take a look that as Modi basks in India's global ascent, the cracks at home grow harder to ignore. Kashmir's alienation, Punjab's simmering grievances, and the Northeast unrest are not just regional problems. They threaten the idea of India itself. Now, Modi's strategy of repression and deflection has bought him some time, but it is a ticking clock. Now, without genuine dialogue and a willingness to address human rights concerns, his power plays could backfire, fueling a very separatism that he's trying to crush. So, as we say, it is just a big play that he plays with the foreign governments and tries to really pull a blanket over the eyes of the world when it comes to the human rights atrocities. But again, this could very well be what pushes other nations to support the separatist movement and see a balkanization of India, Angus. It's, it could really backfire on him in a very big way.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics in play going on in India, and I mean, if we rewind the clock back to 1947, but ultimately, in the Indian Brahmanical elite inherited from the British Empire, a country that had been basically held together, a nation that had been held together by force. The British Empire had the enormous might of its empire and its armed forces and everything, to ensure that the integrity of India's boundaries were held together against the flow of logic, against the flow of national identities, cultures, etc. But it did manage to contain all the different cultures and identities within the boundaries of India together, essentially by a supremely powerful authoritative force. The British could get away with that. India then inherited that in 1947, and in fact what happened after that, of course, was that desperately violent fracture of partition in which Pakistan emerged, East and West Pakistan emerged ultimately to become Pakistan and Bangladesh. But since then, Modi and all his predecessors over those years, basically the Brahmanical elite, have tried to keep together this artificial construct of India as we know it as India. But ultimately it is made up of all these various different cultures and regions that all have their own regional identity, their own languages. There are so many different languages and different cultures that are diametrically opposed to each other in many cases, that are again artificially collected together into this nation, this relatively young nation. Don't forget, it's a very young nation. So what has history taught us? Well, we only need to look at Yugoslavia, for example. What happened to Yugoslavia? That again, a very similar situation, that was a country of very different cultural identities that was artificially held together, and actually at the time, for many years, was really held together by it was an authoritarian force of Tito, for example, for many years. And it took that one charismatic authoritative figure to keep Yugoslavia together, to keep the lid on those bubbling tensions between the various factions and those different cultural identities. But ultimately, as history has taught us, you can only sustain that for so long, and Yugoslavia exploded apart in a terrible violence. And ultimately, India is sitting on that same sort of bubbling cauldron. It has all these different, disparate cultural identities that they all generally speaking get along together. The problem being, though, is that they still regard themselves as different areas, different regions, different cultural identities. And it is only ultimately the brute force, let's call it, of the Brahmanical elite that is keeping it together. Now, Modi is doing his absolute best to steer India as a united nation forward to try to create this future superpower. But ultimately, he is sitting on some very shaky foundations because, of course, we have the separatist movement in J&K. We have, of course, the massively growing Khalistan movement, and that's a secessionist movement that is now reaching the mainstream. You only need to look at how politics are going in Khalistan, in the Punjab, to see people like Amritpal Singh and his new political party now gaining the upper hand politically and democratically. So the separatist movement is growing in the Punjab. There is also a small separatist movement, for example, in Ladakh. So the whole of northwest India has all these separatist movements that are growing in strength. Look at northeast India, and then we look at Manipur, what's going on there. Manipur has for a long time had a separatist movement. And then look in the south, you've got Tamil Nadu and the Tamils, who are increasingly vocal about why should they put up with central control from Delhi and all the problems, the political problems, financial and economical arguments that they're now coming up with, saying, why should we be ruled and tied to Delhi? So again, you've got the south of India also talking about why should we be part of a so-called united India. So all the ingredients are there, James, for a potential breakup of India. The only thing keeping it together is brute force. And brute force, as has been proven over and over again, as history has proved, it can only work for so long. It only takes one small catalytic event for that to all break apart, and as we say often, it's going to fall like dominoes. So ultimately, Modi is sitting on this on this time bomb, this ticking time bomb. Now, of course, the other issue then is the increasing brute force that Modi's government have taken. For example, pouring in all these troops into J&K, including ripping up part of the constitution to take control in 2019 of J&K. Again, all that is doing is alienating people. It's pushing people more increasingly so into these separatist movements. But also his pushing the Hindu extremist nationalist agenda. It's also alienating his neighbours, and this is where the bigger picture geopolitics come in. And countries like China are just sitting there waiting to take advantage of any cracks or fractures that appear, and they are in there. We know how ruthless China is, and this, of course, is what's concerning the West. And neighbours like Bangladesh are getting increasingly upset. Sri Lanka, likewise, increasingly upset with Modi's regime. Even as far afield as the Maldives, likewise, have been upset with this Hindu extremism and this agenda that Modi and the Brahmins are pushing. So, of course, again, it's increasingly worrying for the West. And ultimately, the West really need to find a solution to this. Either India unites, which will actually goes against all historical logic and experience and past track records of similar situations, or the West is going to have to actually finally accept, as indeed is the Indian government, that it's likely that these separatist movements are going to prevail. It is likely that Khalistan is going to be established in the near future, and along with that probably will come an independent J&K, potentially Tamil Nadu and other parts of India. So James, it's likely, I see the writing is on the wall here. To me, it's just a question of time which way it's going to go.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's take a thought here that Modi, of course, has no concept of. And if you look at India as a beautiful jewel box and you open it up and you have all of these beautiful but very different jewels inside that all have their own sparkle, their own sheen, and their own attractiveness. And that is what the regions of India represent. It is such a beautiful collection as a whole. But I think that when you take them out of that box and you present them properly and give them their own opportunity to shine standing alone, I think that it could really benefit the entire Asian region. And that is by allowing the separation and autonomy, the sovereignty of those nations, I think would really be a beautiful thing in that region, and allow each of those communities to really show their strengths, but also they could find some kind of a union to work together and work with each other. I just think that there is such a missed opportunity to really bring back the respect for human rights and honor what could be such an amazingly powerful and beautiful thing. And as we look at that, Angus, one of the things in history that's been described as beautiful was the old days of the Trojan horse, except it appears that Pakistan might actually be getting India to build the horse behind the wall instead of introducing it as a gift. And what I say by that is that there is such a rising tension going on right now between India and Pakistan, that the Pakistan government is, like you were just saying, that they are using those cracks in the foundation to try and bring forward and join partnerships with people already in India. They are trying to build relationships with the Sikhs, with the Muslims and other minorities, to try and build a group that's already within the country to help them to deal with the struggles that they're facing or the challenges with Modi and his government. Now, as that goes on, of course, there are many other concerns that are brought forward by Pakistan right now, and they've gone as far as to reach out to the UN and the National Security Council and ask for a closed-door meeting to speak about a lot of the international concerns of tensions between India and Pakistan. And as they escalate, again, there are a lot of different ways that they are looking to find solutions or potential paths forward. And this came as a formal request from Islamabad, and sources have confirmed that the National Security Council is indeed convening those closed-door meetings. And this is happening throughout the week with the NSC, and they are going to be thoroughly examining this evolving situation. Now, the specific agenda has not yet been released. It's been very tightly guarded, and we expect that that will continue for obvious reasons. But the gravity of the situation suggests a comprehensive review of the potential threats, diplomatic avenues, and strategic responses that could come out of this. Now, the development, of course, comes on the heels of a noticeable uptick in the cross-border rhetoric and reported incidents fueling anxieties about regional stability. While details remain scarce, diplomatic observers have noted a renewed intensity in statements emanating from both capitals. So we're not saying that it's coming from one side or the other more or less. We're saying that it is a concern on both sides, where there doesn't seem to be a lot of backing down in the posturing that we're seeing and the increased military posturing along the line of control. Now, Islamabad's decision to formally request an NSC review underscores the seriousness to which it views the current climate and its desire for a comprehensive assessment of the implications. Now, the NSC is a high-powered body comprising of key government ministers, security officials, and intelligence chiefs, and it plays a pivotal role in advising the Prime Minister on matters of national security. Their deliberations on this critical issue will undoubtedly involve a multifaceted analysis and considering not only the immediate triggers for the heightened tensions, but also the historical context and potential long-term ramifications, as we know from many other historical events how they have played into long-term problems as opposed to solutions. Now, I'm going to skip down through this article just to kind of give a brief view, just as we are running a bit shorter on time. But given the sensitive nature of the discussions, details are emerging from the closed-door NSC meeting that will likely be limited. However, based on established protocols and the gravity of the situation, several key areas are expected to be under scrutiny. So that'll be intelligence briefings, diplomatic strategies, military preparedness, economic implications, and of course, public communication. And we've talked about that many times as well, about the power of the internet and the power of information when it comes to the media and other transparencies in communication or other divergence and misinformation, as we see India take part in all the time. But it would be obvious that there would be both sides playing into disinformation, misinformation, and trying to win that information campaign and that information war, because that has become as important as the physical or military operations these days. Now, there are major global powers and international organizations that have consistently urged both nations to exercise restraint and engage in dialogue. Any escalation could have far-reaching consequences for regional peace and security. Again, we know that that India and Pakistan play a major role in the region, that when they may not get along and may not cooperate as much, but they still play their own independent roles in the geopolitical climate of the world and the regional stability within that area. And so again, if you're interested in reading this in a bit more context, you're welcome to just kind of pause the screen and read a bit more on each of the different points of interest and points of concern. But Angus, this is definitely still a very tense issue, something that is unfolding and something that we'll be following closely as the next week progresses, Angus.
Yeah, it's well, the big question really is what is the end game for India and Pakistan in this whole situation? And really, that can only be determined by who genuinely was behind this terrorist attack in Pahalgam. I mean, of course, as I say, our audience and many commenters have come out openly into the mainstream and accused India of actually being behind the attack themselves. But ultimately, you have to say, well, okay, what is the end game for India? Many have speculated all sorts of different theories on this, but ultimately, for example, the Indus River Treaty is something that we do know they have been wanting to renegotiate for some time, and they've obviously, if they are behind this attack, then they thought, well, it's just easier and quicker just to do a false flag attack, and then we can just basically suspend the treaty. And basically, tough, what are you going to do about it? But of course, that does have bigger ramifications, because it could ultimately lead to war. I mean, wars have been fought over similar things in the past, so the stakes are very high. Ultimately, again, what would be the end game for Pakistan if Pakistan were behind this attack? I mean, ultimately, what is the goal of Pakistan? It's not going to accelerate J&K's independence or break away from India. That is unlikely to happen through a simple terrorist attack like this. All it's doing is just provoking India. So, as many people said, well, what's in it for Pakistan? Ultimately, if you weigh the balance of scales, there's a lot more in this in this attack for India than there was for Pakistan. Ironically, the United Nations then. So it's interesting then. I think think it's more symbolic, the fact that Pakistan have gone to the UN. Because ultimately, I mean, what can the UN do? Probably very little. It tends to be a bit of a talking shop. We've been a little bit critical about the UN in the past because ultimately, how effective is the United Nations? Well, it's useful, but is it effective? That's a whole different discussion. But ultimately, it's unlikely the UN will actually broker anything here. I think ultimately they may help get both sides to sit down and talk. But I don't think the UN, other than that, can do anything about it. But I think this is more about symbolism. It symbolises the fact if this meeting's been called by Islamabad, it does imply then that Islamabad is throwing their hands up, saying, look, hang on, we're innocent in this. We're not behind this. We want investigations to take place. We want the UN to get involved in this because we've actually nothing to hide. And we are, and again, it implies that they are suspicious of what actually genuinely was behind this attack. And therefore, by implication, I think there is almost a silent accusation that maybe India were indeed behind this attack. So I think, James, although I think this meeting of the UN will probably produce very little tangible, pragmatic results, in reality, I think it's very symbolic. I think it does once again feed into this narrative that is bubbling beneath the surface, which is who actually is behind this attack at Pahalgam, who actually stood to gain most from this attack, and really the finger points at India, James. So I think there's a very, very interesting development.
Absolutely, and it wouldn't be beyond India to come out with claims that Pakistan or certain groups in Pakistan have claimed responsibility. Again, it's all about that information war, Angus, and where it leads. So again, it is, really an unstable situation, and with any hope and dedication there, they can find a way forward without it escalating to a full-blown confrontation or war.
Indeed. Okay, James, let's move on as the clock is marching quicker than ever. I'm going to move on to my first story, and I'm going to talk about Jaggi Singh Johal. There's been quite an interesting development in recent days over the story of Jaggi Singh Johal. Now, the Sikh Federation UK has been one of the organisations lobbying very, very hard to assist Gurpreet, Jaggi's brother, in his campaign against the Labour government to take more action to try and free Jaggi. And as part of the Sikh Federation's tactic and strategy, they've been pressuring from grassroots level. They've encouraged grassroots to push upwards through the political chain to pressure MPs, the representatives, the political representatives in every constituency, to in turn pressure David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, in turn to pressure Keir Starmer to do something about Jaggi. And a letter was written very recently pressuring David Lammy. It was written to David Lammy saying, basically, look, you've got to do something about Jaggi Singh Johal, particularly as he's just been found innocent. His case has been thrown out. One of the 9 cases has been thrown out. And he's been shown to be innocent of these charges. And all the other cases follow essentially the same legal argument from the prosecution side. So therefore, by implication, all the rest of his cases should be thrown out. Yet he remains not just arbitrarily detained by India, he has suffered torture, he is undergoing solitary confinement apparently, so his conditions are deteriorating. And yet the British government remain stationary. They are doing absolutely nothing about it. So this campaign to pressure Starmer's government to do something about it is really ramping up. And a letter was sent by 100 plus MPs to David Lammy demanding he takes action. Now, interestingly, and here's the twist. This letter was sent, it was signed by all these MPs, cross-party MPs, including several Sikh MPs. Now, last Tuesday, a week ago, on a programme called the Akal channel. It's a weekly programme in Punjabi, and in fact representatives of the Sikh Federation were on that programme last Tuesday, and they named many of the signatories of this letter, including 2 Sikh MPs who'd signed this letter. Now, weirdly, a few days later, those signatories, those 2 Sikh MPs, withdrew their signatures. Interestingly. Why? Now, those 2 MPs, Gurinder Singh Josan, he's the Labour MP for Smethwick, and Sonia Kumar, the Labour MP for Dudley, initially signed that letter. They then, after their names were made public, they suddenly withdrew their signatures. Now, the question has been raised, James, why Why would two Sikh MPs suddenly withdraw their signatures? And the accusation has been levelled, now coming from several quarters. It is very clear that India has been onto them. India obviously got their names in advance from the Akal Channel's publication, or their broadcast last Tuesday. And behind the scenes, something has gone on. And that accusation now is flying around saying India or Indian agents, Hindutva, RSS, whatever agents, are now pressuring those two Sikh MPs. We don't know how, but it is likely that that has to be the reason. Why else would two Sikh MPs withdraw their support to free Jaggi? We do know that Jaggi is this hugely controversial topic between India and the UK. We do know that Starmer's government and his predecessors, Cameron's government, Johnson's government, and others, have really refused to entertain freeing Jaggi and demanded that India free Jaggi because they know that a trade deal is at stake. So, unfortunately, the British government has been completely intransigent for so long about the Jaggi case, since his arbitrary detention in 2017. And yet, even now, as pressure is mounting from beneath, from below, from this grassroots upwards, saying you've got to do something about this, even Labour MPs in their own government's party are pressuring Starmer and Lammy to do something about it. They are still intransigent. And now it appears that pressure is coming from India behind the scenes to get these individual MPs to withdraw their support. And as the Sikh Federation have announced, this flies in the face of this new National Security Act 2023 that came into force recently. This is a new piece of legislation designed to prevent foreign interference in the UK, particularly politically here in the UK. This, if it is true, if evidence is uncovered that India has pressured these two Sikh MPs to withdraw their support, then that is a clear legal breach of the National Security Act. A criminal offence has been perpetrated by India. And that is the big question. So I have no doubt, James, that behind the scenes there's an awful lot of investigation going on. But the Sikh Federation UK have publicly come out and said this, if proved true, if these two Sikh MPs have been essentially pressured and forced to withdraw their signatures from this letter, then a criminal offence has happened. India has criminally interfered in the British legal system. We will follow this one with interest, James.
Absolutely, Angus, and I think that it really goes to show the power and influence that the Modi government has and the reach that they continue to have, not only within foreign nations, but right into the parliament and the governance of different countries. And that is, again, still a big concern for the foreign interference that they are practicing. I think that this, if an investigation plays out and it's transparent and open in the investigatory process, I think that it may really prove the far-reaching tentacles of their reach. And that should be concerning to all. Now, I know that organizations, we talk often about Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. Now, Amnesty International this week, their leader is actually coming to Canada to try and get a meeting with Mark Carney about the different situations globally, in particular about the U.S. and human rights. But I think that they have really got to step up their game in terms of the international presence on the social media stage and on the internet stage of things to really bring attention to matters like this. Because I think that the mainstream media and the Western media is really overlooking the plight of Jaggi, and it's definitely not right.
Indeed, absolutely. And again, it's just, I think the one positive story to take out of all this is the effectiveness of grassroots campaigning, because suddenly now we have this letter with over 100 signatures from MPs within cross-party. It's a cross-party letter, this, which is quite unusual. So clearly this grassroots campaigning is really taking effect. It is, again, as a lesson to the community. And again, this has been a community-led initiative. It's the community have created this, and the impact then is the amount of pressure now on Keir Starmer is absolutely enormous. So again, let that be an interesting lesson to the community. Keep campaigning, because it does actually work. Right, James, clock marching on. Let's move on quickly to my second story. Again, I'm going to stay in the UK on this one. There was, over the weekend, a very important seminar that was held, and it was hosted by the Sikh Youth UK, and Deepa Singh's organisation have been very active in one particular area in recent times, and that is, of course, the grooming gangs. Now, we've talked about this story quite a lot in the recent past. It's a terrible story of Muslim grooming gangs that have been grooming young girls particularly, and across, it's affected many communities, but the Sikh community has been directly affected this for many decades, and they, of course, were the first communities to bring this to the attention of the authorities, but the authorities have been terribly lax in their actions against this. Now, from 1997 to 2013, an independent report confirmed that over 1,400 children had been sexually exploited in Rotherham. That's a northern town alone. In just one northern town, over 1,400 children have been exploited in just those short years. Many of the children have been threatened, beaten, raped, trafficked, and dismissed by the very authorities that were supposed to be there to protect them. And yet these weren't isolated incidents, they were part of a broader systemic pattern that is still, even now, not being fully addressed. It's happening across many northern towns. According to the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse that was unfolded by the government at the time, it failed to comprehensively investigate or expose the full scale of this abuse, particularly by so-called, what they call rape gangs, reflecting organised patterns of exploitation in many towns, including Bradford, Rochdale, Rotherham, Telford and many others. Now, over the weekend, on Saturday particularly, hundreds of Sikhs from across the UK attended an emergency seminar on this targeted grooming of vulnerable individuals. And after recent, it particularly was called because there's been this massive recent surge in cases reported by families here in the UK, by Sikh families. Now, Sikh Youth UK hosted another event last night in Leicester to continue this national focus on this ongoing issue. So, James, this is a very worrying issue, and many people were actually attended this event over the weekend and indeed last night in Leicester. It included not just the Sangats from various areas across the UK. It did include many activists, many campaigners, many victims of these terrible grooming gangs. And I'm just going to play you quickly a video of one such activist. This is Sammy Woodhouse, has been really active, has been campaigning very vociferously. She herself is from a northern town, you can tell that by her accent, but she's very vocal. She's really thrown her weight behind this. She's very active on social media. Here is her addressing the meeting on Saturday night.
Now, one of the reasons why I'm here today is because I know that things have been happening in your community as well. And as someone that's now working on the rape gang inquiry, I would like to, offer you the opportunity to try and engage into that inquiry. Now, anyone can engage, whether you're a survivor, a family member, professional, anyone. If you have any information, any evidence, you can submit that anonymously, or you can work, openly. It's entirely your choice. So I just wanted to give you that opportunity. Now, I'm going to be here all day, so if anybody wants to come and see me afterwards, I know sometimes people don't like to ask me questions in front of everyone. That's absolutely fine. You can come and speak to me afterwards, or I can give you my details, and we can chat afterwards. So thank you, everybody, for listening.
So there you go. That was Sammy Woodford just basically addressing the audience to say, look, keep at it. And she joined many activists, many campaigners who are fighting so hard to raise awareness of this terrible situation, these grooming gangs. It is ongoing, and it's actually outrageous that the authorities are still not taking enough action, James. It's absolutely appalling. This has been going on for decades. It's the Sikh community that's been calling out. And yet the government still here in the UK really not doing anything about it.
So, as you say, Angus, I mean, it is an ongoing issue with these grooming gangs. Now, we know that there has been action in the past, but whether or not that was actually enough or if it went in far enough, and as you've said in the past, that there is a lot of racial implications that come out, or at least fear thereof, and that's where investigators need to stop looking at it through a black, white, brown, yellow, or any other color lens and just see it for what it is and hold those who are accountable responsible. Make sure that they face the legal system and the full powers of that legal system to stop this activity. And human trafficking is a problem around the globe, and there are a lot of resources as well through international agencies and organizations that can help with, with multifaceted cooperation with other nations as well to help crack down when it comes to the transnational issue. But especially, the grooming gangs need to be dealt with, and that is a major ongoing issue.
Indeed, pretty appalling. So again, we will keep on this and keep highlighting this fact until the British government does actually take some action about it. Okay, James, clock counting down again. I've got one very quick story just to cover, which I'm delighted to cover. Over the weekend, a demonstration in central London saw Khalistan supporters standing in solidarity with Kashmiri and Pakistanis being targeted by India, following, of course, those dreadful attacks in Pahalgam. And let me just quickly play you this video, just so you can see how wonderful it is to see the Khalistan flag in London.
Zindabad, 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 Zindabad. Bole Soneha, Raj karega, Raj karega, Raj karega, Raj karega. Zoor pe nishan rain, Zoor pe nishan rain. Pakistan, Pakistan.
Bole so Nehal indeed. And actually, interestingly, there was a Kill Modi Politics banner there. So somebody's obviously also watching Gurpatan Singh Panoon with one of his catchphrases there, James. But James, always good to see the Khalistan flag flying high wherever it may be across the diaspora.
Absolutely, Angus. And I mean, even when I was at the Vaisakhi Day parade and I'm looking up at some of the flags that are just kind of draped out on the poles, but they're kind of flapping sideways, but they're just flapping beautifully against a nice blue sky. So you've got the vibrant yellow, you've got the blue there, and then the background of the beautiful sky. So, I mean, just the freedom that represents is just very ironic as well.
Absolutely right. So on that note, let's just rush through into the comments columns and loads of comments as well. We'll have to rush through these again as the clock counts down. Thank you, Amakara, just to start us off. Pointed us in the direction of a very interesting video on how the Khalsa originally ruled and survived. It's a long video. I haven't had time to watch the whole thing, but thank you, Amakara, for that. So as a general message to all our wonderful audience, thank you for all these links that you've been sending in. Do keep them coming. There's some fascinating videos and pieces of education that James and I can learn from. So hopefully we can finish off that video and come back with an interesting report on what it was saying. But anyway, icon systems. That's an interesting point. James, this person says, look, there have been thousands of illegal attacks by Muslims against Hindus over the past 700 years, including the ethnic cleansing of Kashmir. Perhaps it should be reversed. So, okay, this is it. I suppose this is basically pointing out the hypocrisy, saying, look, we're all calling out the Hindu extremist attacks on the Muslim population, but the Muslims have been at it for hundreds of years themselves. Well, I think my message to that one, James, is look, two wrongs don't make a right.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that there were other points in history where you had the Irish slavery eras and things like that as well. So, I mean, just because you go back far enough in history, chances are you're going to find abuses or battles or other atrocities between certain communities or certain regional conflicts. So again, if you're going back 700 years, let's move forward instead of keep looking back to find the differences and move together, finding our similarities and what we can bring together to complement each other.
Well said, absolutely right. So yes, so thank you, Icon Systems, for your comment. I think it's a valid comment, but ultimately, as I say, two wrongs don't make a right, and we need to look forward. It's all about the future. And ultimately, we're all aiming for a peaceful world, really, ideally. Now, Minder Singh, yes, the quality of voice is not good. This is in the podcast I did with Dr. Graywell last week. Apologies for that. The sound on his side, for some bizarre reason, was a little bit broken up. It wasn't great. So, yeah, point noted, unfortunately. These things do happen. We are not the BBC or the Canadian Broadcasting Company. We don't have limitless resources and incredible satellite links. But we do our best, James.
Although I think our budget might be bigger than the CBC.
Which isn't really saying a lot, but anyway. Right, Nearbang, who actually is usually one of our critics. This is slightly, I'd say, a slightly provocative comment. I think either Khalistan will be formed this month after Pakistan defeats India and captures Delhi. Otherwise, Khalistan becomes a piece of doo-doo, let's call it, which will just smell bad in the West Midlands of the UK and Canada. Westerners will have to live with that smell for the rest of their lives. Now, the reason I put up this comment, because actually there is a serious side to this comment, and maybe you didn't even realise this, but ultimately, what is going on between India and Pakistan at the moment? I mentioned earlier about catalytic events, and I've said this in the past. When you have an artificial construct like India is, like Yugoslavia was, like the Soviet Union were, it only takes one strangely unpredictable, unforeseen catalytic event for things to suddenly happen, gain a pace, and suddenly you may find the breakup of a nation like India. And maybe, for all we know, that the outcome of a Pakistan-India conflict, if that is what this is brewing up to, maybe it could well be that the United Nations and the international community may, for example, may step in and say, oh no, right, you two countries, take a step back. You've got to stop fighting. The only solution to this is to establish a buffer zone between you two nations before you start lobbing nuclear weapons at each other. And that buffer zone just might happen to be Khalistan. So you see, James, you never know. You can never predict world events. Stranger things have happened, have they not?
Absolutely. Excuse me, but yeah, that is one concern I have, is whether, the potential lies with Modi to utilize that, saying that he's going after Pakistan and actually make strikes within Punjab as well, and making false claims that way to use it as an excuse. So I have some concerns about that as well, but absolutely, it could be a catalyst to really take Khalistan over the next threshold.
Yeah, so thank you, Nearbang, for that comment. Pritam Kaurman, this was an interesting one, James. This is one for you. Overseas friends of BJP candidate interference with Pierre Poilievre. Now, Pritam sent us a YouTube video link, which I'll show you in a second. And this is Pierre Poilievre being questioned by the audience about about various donations and questionable donations. And here is his response.
I want to ask you about a global news report this morning detailing donations and support you've received from the overseas friends of the BJP, Narendra Modi's party in India. How comfortable are you receiving support from from friends of the BJP, given that members of that party are allegedly behind violence against Sikh separatists here in Canada?
Well, first of all, I received 37,000 separate donations that anybody can make online. We don't have the capacity to do CSIS background checks on every single person who makes those 37,000 donations. We condemn 100% any foreign interference in Canada, and anyone who collaborates with it should be jailed. But the real question you should be asking is, why haven't the Liberals got the foreign agent registry up and running? Because then we would know proactively who is working on behalf of a foreign government. Etc.,
etc. And then he spends the next minutes just lambasting the Liberals and basically turning the attention on another party. Basically a diverting tactic. But ultimately, interesting, his stock defence, and he has been apparently questioned about this several times in the past by various investigative journalists, saying, look, there are questionable donations to the Conservative Party and indeed to Polly Everett himself. He's been hosted at various events, as Pritam kindly points out. And James, it looks like his stock defence is the fact, how can I investigate all 37,000 donations? But it all points a bit of an interesting picture, James.
Yeah, and let's face it, there are different websites in Canada and probably there in the UK and elsewhere that only allow you to actually make online payments if you are within the province or within the country. And also there's the need to register your name and all of that. So you could take it to a next level to have a piece of identification registered or added to that donation on a secure site. And that's not going to eliminate the potential for those questionable donations to be made, but it's also going to give an easier way to track those donations back to wherever they're coming from, Angus.
Yeah, so interesting that he's often on the back foot on that one, and he said he rolls out his stock defence. The question is that defence may disappear soon, and they are going to have to be a lot more transparent about where that money comes from, and rightly so. Free Spirit. Yes, thank you, Free Spirit, for making this comment. This is again about grooming gangs. We had that commenter who said, look, no, these grooming gangs are 97% white, and again brought in this whole racist argument about it. Well, as Free Spirit says, look, and funnily enough, you make the point I wanted to make when I was talking about that story, but we didn't have time. But as you say, one of your respected professors used to say there are lies and there are damn lies and there are statistics. It's a very well-known phrase, that. Indeed, and what you rightly point out is, look, if you argue that 2% of groomers are Muslim, what we really need to look at is what effectively is called the per capita. In other words, what is the proportion of groomers within that population? And that could tell a very different story. Absolutely, it's the per capita analysis. So again, it's all about statistics, James. Anybody can manipulate statistics. I did question those statistics that commenter came up with. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter what the ethnic makeup is of grooming gangs. It's the fact that they all should equally be tackled, and that's really what it's all about, James.
Absolutely, and numbers are subjective, Angus, because 100% of my mothers think I'm still cute, right? But I've only got one mother.
Absolutely right. As they say, damn lies and statistics. With you all the way on that one, James. And then to wrap up, Satbachan Singh says, great guys, only truth and the godly way. Absolutely right. We hopefully have been guided by the great Waheguruji himself or herself in what we're doing. And ultimately, Lak Birai wraps it up by saying, I love my homeland, Khalistan. Khalistan Zindabad. Well, James, as we often say, we indeed absolutely fully behind the whole concept. It is hopefully likely that it is going to happen. As I keep saying, it only takes a catalytic event to get those dominoes to fall. Who knows how far away we are from the establishment of Khalistan, James?
Exactly, Angus. But as I said, we're still looking forward to that meal. But then again, look at me. I look forward to every meal.
I wouldn't dare possibly comment. But on that note, we must wrap things up for another day. Thanks so much for watching, as always. Do keep those comments coming in. Some great comments have been coming in, some really interesting comments, very informative comments, especially if you've got links to interesting things that you think we should take a look at and perhaps talk about on the show. Don't forget, you can also send those to our email. That's message@satellitetv.com. Do keep those coming in. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching once again. It is a goodbye from me. It's a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.